What number lesson? No, because I don't I record it to YouTube, but I'm not on YouTube to label it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, unfortunately. Not unfortunate. But I did label it as chapter 37. So the last 3 or 4 chapters, although there might be one chapter that we're missing because I recorded it on the computer when the internet wasn't working. So it actually may not be up there, but 35 and 36, for sure are online on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, 37 is sort of a continuation from 35 and 36.
Good.
Good morning. Welcome back. This stretch hopefully should take us quite a while before we have to make any more interruptions. They tell a story of a young man, a young lad, who the rabbi came over to him one day and said, me and you, we're going to change the world. The kid wasn't the best kid in the Hebrew school, but he got excited. Him and the rabbi, well, what does the rabbi have planned for us? So the rabbi continued, the small world, your world. Every person is the Torah considers a person a micro universe. It says a person who saves another person's life, it's as if they saved an entire universe. So the rabbi was telling the kid, me and you, we're going to work on a project on saving you. The last 2 chapters we spoke about what the end goal is, Mashiach, and when this will happen. Well, the end goal is to make the world a dwelling place for God, and it'll happen when Mashiach comes. But how do I fit into this? What's my role in this big picture? And basically, what Alter Rebbe is going to tell us, the big, I guess, paradigm shift is going to be, in the previous chapter, we introduced the term all the way at the beginning, the very first page 484, the very beginning of chapter 36. The Alter Rebbe says, in a well-known statement, our rabbis declare that the purpose for which this world was created is that the Holy One, blessed be He, desired to have an abode in the lower realms. Mm-hmm. This stands at the foundation of the entire Torah and the entire universe. What's the purpose of it all? To make a dwelling place for God. How do we do that? So we discussed last couple of weeks, that doing mitzvahs, right? Just like there's the candle, the soul on top of the body. How do you connect the soul to the body? We went through in the macro. The Alter Rebbe is going to tell us here that these words, make a dwelling place for God in the lower realms, it's not just the location. Where should the dwelling place be in the lower realms? It's also the method through which it's done. In other words, through the lower realms. So not just is the home made in the lower realms, the home is made through the lower realms. Just to give it's not really a metaphor, but imagine you wanted to build a home in the middle of the wilderness, and you wanted all of the materials of the home to be built from that spot in the wilderness. You don't want to have to haul any materials. You want to use the land that you purchased and build a home with the land, stone, whatever you could find there, wood, stones, any materials you can. You might have to grow some materials. You might have to farm some materials, right? But anything that you can do, you want to make all the materials from there. When God wants to have a dwelling place in this world, He could have very easily just created a home. And in a sense, He did. Adam, before the sin, the world was perfect, or almost perfect. But at that time, it was considered perfect. That was God's home. But God didn't want that. What would be the point? The point is when you can create the challenges, why would someone want to build a home with the materials in the land that he purchased? Because it's a challenge. If it wasn't a challenge, it wouldn't be tempting to do it. Yeah. These things can take much longer. It may not be as comfortable, may even cost more money. Who knows? But it's a challenge. The person wants it. So this is going to be the key of understanding our involvement. If we take a biblical scriptural verse, right after the Jews left Egypt, they received the Torah at Sinai, right? So if you remember some of the verses there's actually a verse that says God came down on Sinai. Vayered Hashem al God literally doesn't mean physically, but God literally came down on Sinai, gave us the Torah. You weren't allowed to touch the mountain. God said, if you touch the mountain, you die. Moses had to make a guardrail around the mountain to make sure no one would come too close. And then what does it say after the giving of the Torah? When the shofar blew, God went off of the mountain. Everyone was able to come back on the mountain. What happened 40 days later? The golden calf. Took another 80 days for Moses to ask God for forgiveness, forgot to forgive. Yom Kippur, God says, you're forgiven. What happens the day after Yom Kippur? Moses commands the Jewish people to build a temple as an atonement for the golden calf. And if you look later in the book of Exodus, you look at the very first verse of the Torah portion of Teruma, the Torah, God says, God spoke to Moses to tell the Jewish people to collect for me donations, and they should make for me a temple, and I will dwell amongst them. What happened? Last time God wanted to be amongst us, what did he do? He came down the mountain. Why didn't he just come down? Why does he need us to build him a temple? And a physical temple? Well, God needs a physical temple. Last time he didn't need us to build him a physical temple. He came down on the mountain. Well, what happened last?
We need God to have a home.
Why don't? But why?
Because otherwise, you're not gonna. You can't put it all together. So I mean that makes sense to me.
In other words, you're saying the right thing, but just to clarify what you're clarifying, if God would have stayed on the mountain and not left, would that be different than God coming into the temple that we built?
Yes.
Why?
Because we built the temple. We didn't build the mountain. That was God's mountain to begin with.
Right.
So we didn't build it. Now we're building a home. And that's a very different thing.
Why? Can you explain?
The game? Yeah.
We've skin in the game.
Skin in the game.
In other words, let's say, so it says God left the mountain lost its holiness, and the Jewish people said, but if God would have stayed forever on the mountain, even though God's presence would have always been the same as in the temple, maybe even more, but at the end of the day, what happens if God would have left the next day? Would have left the mountain the next day? Who knows what would have happened? Mm-hmm. In other words, when you have skin in the game, it's not just, why should I want you to have skin in the game? Because when you have skin in the game, then you cherish it more. And then when God leaves, if God forbid that God's presence leaves the next day, you're not going to run off to a golden calf so quickly. Yeah?
Maybe that is the whole reason why, here he was up in the mountain and then they built the golden calf. But the second time they didn't, because he was building a tabernacle and all that kind of stuff. Maybe if he had done that the first time, they would have never built the golden calf.
That's possible. That's very possible. But that we would have never learned anything from that.
That's true.
We would not know.
He had to teach us a lesson.
By the way, I don't know the statistics, but at least this is what people say. It could be it's true or not. I imagine there's some truth to it. That most people that win lotteries, the money doesn't stick around for long.
True.
It's true. So statistically, it's true.
statistically, it's
or,
true.
or factually it's
No,
true.
you can't get that rich and not spend it all
Why? Why not?
because you didn't grow up with the money.
Because it's not just because you didn't grow up with the money, because you didn't earn it. Money that comes cheap leaves cheap. In other words, it's not, you don't cherish it as much because you didn't work for it as much. Yeah. So therefore, God wants us to create this dwelling place. How do we do it? How do we create the dwelling place? So what's the end game when Moshiach comes? We discussed that the world will reveal godliness. When you look at the world today, you look at the table, you don't see God. You look at the trees, if you think a little bit, maybe you could sort of see God. But the average person, they look around, they don't see God. They see themselves, they see what's important to them, they see someone more powerful than them. The purpose of what does it mean to make a dwelling place for God? We said that a person, the benefit, the advantage a person has in his own house, rather than in a hotel or in someone else's house, even though you can do the same things, is because there you're exposed. You can feel exposed and not vulnerable. Vulnerable in a good way. In other words, you can be halachically, it's problematic to walk around your house naked, okay? Because God's everywhere. You're not supposed to be naked. Even it says even in your bedroom, you shouldn't be. You should get dressed or undressed under your covers, or in a room that's designated for it, like a bathroom, etc. But technically, naturally, in human nature, a person can walk around their house just in the most vain way. A person can feels comfortable walking around their house half naked, let's say. Yeah. Something they wouldn't do or would be less likely to do, or even if they would do it, they wouldn't feel as vulnerable as if they did it in a hotel room or in they were staying in their friend's house or in their parents' house, even if they had their own room and they locked the room. You still wouldn't feel the same type of self being exposed. That's the point of a dwelling. Why God wants a dwelling place. What does it mean, a dwelling place? God should be able to feel exposed in the world and not, and it'll feel like his own world. Yeah. So in the world, in order to affect that in this world, we have to look for all of the things that are low. Because remember, we're looking to make God a dwelling place in the lowest world. So if we think about making God a dwelling place in our Tanya class, that's not the lowest place in the world, right? We're talking spiritual things. We're, pretty much all focused on being here together and studying together. I wouldn't consider this the lowest place, right? So we got to categorize the world. We got to look for the low things. So if we compare, let's say, body and soul, the soul would be higher, literally more spiritual, not in space. Higher, the body would be lower. Yeah. Thought and speech. Thought would be higher, right? Speech would be lower. Speech and action. Speech would be higher. Action would be lower. Any two things in this world you can compare, and usually in any action that you do, or in any thought process you do, there's the physical of it and the spiritual of it. Yeah. Eating, there's the physical eating, and then there's the enjoyment, the pleasure, the taste. That's not a physical. I'm sorry. That's not a physical. Wait. Okay. Now it's not going to stop. There we go. So we have to look for the physical things to make a dwelling place for God there. And this is why most mitzvahs are done with physical objects. Because the purpose is to bring the awareness of God into the physical. So when we do a mitzvah, every mitzvah we do, we are advancing the macro redemption. We are advancing the macro purpose by focusing on our micro. Every mitzvah we do, we invite God into another element of the lower realms. Now, when we talk about the lower, every time you do a mitzvah, there are three or four details that are involved that Alter Rebbe is going to discuss now. I don't know if we'll get through all of them today, but we'll try. The first is the physical object through which you do the mitzvah. So, for example, we just had sukkahs, the boards of the sukkah, the schach of the sukkah, the lulav, the etrog. Yeah, those are all plant-based materials. Those are physical objects through which the mitzvah was done. Then you have the body that's doing the mitzvah. My hands, my feet, my head. Sometimes it's not my physical, it's not the lower part of my body, it's my mouth, which compared to action is probably a little more spiritual. Prayer, Torah study, or other things like that. And then there is, Alter Rebbe is going to talk about the food that you eat, that gives you the energy to do the mitzvah. And included in the food is the 6 days a week that you work to earn the food. And everything else in your life is involved, included in this process of doing a mitzvah. And this process of elevating the lower worlds, let's not talk about elevating, even though it is elevating, but revealing God within the lower realms, within the lower worlds, is really the purpose for which we're in exile. If we discussed last time that the whole purpose of the world is to make a dwelling place, and that will happen when Mashiach comes, so why doesn't God just bring Mashiach? And we'll have a dwelling place for God. So we said, because we want skin in the game, right? The very interesting thing, you know how you say exile in Hebrew? Galut, okay? But the root word is gola. Or either way, gola, gimel, vav, lamed, hey. Gola is the word for exile. Do you know how you say redemption in Hebrew? Geula. The same 4 words of gola is in geula. What else is in geula that makes the word different? Which additional letter is there? Which 5th letter is there? Hey. No, gola also has a hey at the end. Geula. Gimel vav lamed hey is gola. How would you spell geula? Aleph. Gimel aleph vav lamed hey. So how do you transform exile into redemption? By introducing the aleph into exile. What does aleph represent? Yeah, but what? So why is the Torah Hashem? It says the Torah complained why God started it with a bet, the second letter. Why not with the aleph? Why is it not number 1? So that God said He's reserving the aleph for the 10 Commandments. Right? How does God introduce Himself in the 10 Commandments? Anochi, I am, right, with an aleph. So aleph is seen, or the big aleph, the capital aleph, is seen as referring to God. So when you bring God into exile, that's how you bring about redemption. Again, so anything, the more exile you can get, the more the opportunity you have to bring God into the exile. It says when Mashiach comes, we will miss all of the missed opportunities of exile. We'll yearn for exile again so that we could do a better job in preparing ourselves for Mashiach. Obviously, we want Mashiach now. we want to get out of here. But if we would only appreciate how much we're able to accomplish now to prepare for that time, and that it'll be, because remember, every additional a piece of skin we put in the game now means that the reward later is much more precious to us, is much more ours. Right? Let's say the teacher says, at the end of the year, we're going to go on a trip. But in order to go on the trip, you have to fill up the marble jar. But even if we don't fill up the marble jar, at the end of the year, we're going to go on the trip. How motivated are kids to be to not much. Oh, but what they don't know is that when they're going to go on the trip at the end of the year, the marble jar isn't full, may not get all of the amenities that they would have gotten had the marble jar been full. But if the kids would know during the year that the marble jars, they're going to go on the trip anyway. But the more marbles they get, the more meaningful the trip will be. Now they're going to try to fill up more marbles, right? So true, Mashiach has to come at a certain time, and Mashiach will come regardless whether we deserve it or not at that point, whenever that point is. But could you imagine how much more meaningful it would be if we would do the proper preparations? This is the purpose of exile. 2,000 years apparently isn't enough isn't long enough for God. It's definitely long enough for us, and that's why we pray 3 times a day to get us out of here. Because at the end of the day, there's a limit. At a certain point, the kids want the trip, right? There, it comes the last day of the year. They don't care, even though they would love to fill up the marble jar. They're like, today's the last day. Just get us out of here. We'll, next year we'll try a little harder. But so this is the let's see the foundation here that Alter Rebbe lays in the beginning of the chapter. Page 496 in the New Times. Now, this ultimate perfection of the Messianic era and the time of the resurrection of the dead, meaning why will there be a Messianic era? What will be the resurrection of the dead? Meaning the revelation of the Ein Sof light in this physical world. That's the definition of Moshiach, that the divine light is revealed in this physical world. When you look at physicality, you don't see physical, you see God. So this perfection is dependent on our actions and divine service throughout the period of exile. Unlike the aforementioned revelation at Sinai, which was initiated by God. For it is the mitzvah itself that causes, in other words, creates its reward. It says in the Mishnah that the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. Schar mitzvah mitzvah. What does that mean? How is it usually understood? The reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. So the way it's usually understood is that there's no real connection. In other words, God will reward your mitzvah with something good in the next world and in the afterlife, etc. Yeah, but what does it say? It says, the Mishnah says schar mitzvah mitzvah, that there's a direct connection between the action and the reward. Why? Because how will the next world come about? Through the mitzvah. In other words, when you cook a gourmet meal, what's the reward for your cooking the meal? The meal, eating it, right? The meal. So when we say schar mitzvah mitzvah, what's the reward of the mitzvah? The mitzvah itself. Because the mitzvah is making the world a divine world. So when you are going to, Mashiach will come and you will enjoy that world, you will be enjoying the mitzvah. You will be enjoying the reward of your effort, which is your effort itself. That is the reward. And Alter Rebbe explains this. By performing the mitzvah, man draws the revelation of blessed Ein Sof light from above downward, to be clothed in the physicality of this world. In other words, in an object which had heretofore, in other words, before this, been under the dominion of Klipat Noga and had received its vitality from this Klipa. Okay, so before we continue with some examples there, in other words, we said the first thing that you accomplish by doing a mitzvah is affecting the object through which the mitzvah was done, right? Let me ask you a question. If someone asked you if they could bury a cow in the cemetery, what would you say?
Why?
Why? Why would you do that? And if you own the cemetery, would you allow them to bury the cow there? Probably not. Well, it depends on how much they're offering. How much they're offering. But if it was your family's cemetery, you probably wouldn't. Right.
It sounds religious. I don't know why.
So I have a surprise for you, which isn't a surprise. You're just not connecting a cow. We bury cows in cemeteries. Not all cows, not every part of the cow. But anytime you have a Torah scroll, a mezuzah, or tefillin that are not usable anymore, we bury them. Well, what are they? They come from a cow or a sheep or a cattle, kosher animal. Why do we bury cow skin in the ground?
Because it has the letters in it.
Right.
Yeah, God's name.
And what if it doesn't? What if it was erased?
If it was just nothing, just
The
the
straps of the tefillin? In other words, there are certain things that when you do a mitzvah with them, they reveal godliness so much that it becomes a part of them. When you see tefillin, you don't see animal skin. What do you see? You see mitzvah. You see God. When you see a Torah scroll, no one sees parchment. No one, when someone sees a Torah scroll, no one sees, oh, the velvet cover. What do they see? They see Torah. What's Torah? Even if someone doesn't know exactly what, it's who I am. It's my connect. Even if you can't describe it, it's not what you see. When you see a mezuzah on the door, no one's looking at the mezuzah. Now, if you have a fancy case, maybe people look at the case, but that's not the mezuzah. Mezuzah is the scroll. No one looks at it. It's rolled up. There's nothing to look at. There's nothing to see. You don't see parchment. What do you see? No, you don't see the. What do you see? You see the physical, but what do you see in the physical? You see God. Okay, obviously, you don't see it. It's not a vision. You see the divine purpose of. You see the mezuzah. You see mitzvah. That's what you see. So there are certain objects that when you perform a mitzvah with them, they become holy. And then you have to bury them. But what do we see happen? We took a physical object and we revealed the godliness within the object. What happens with a lulav? A lulav, we do a mitzvah with a lulav. You have to bury a lulav?
No.
No, you don't have to bury a lulav. Are you allowed to throw it out in the garbage?
No, we usually burn it with our comments.
Many people burn it with their chametz. You can throw it out, but if you do, we do it in a respectful way. You don't put it in a garbage bag. Wrap it in its own bag. They put it in recycle maybe, as opposed to the garbage. You put it in, or if you're going to burn it in the chametz, you don't leave it on the floor and walk all over it till Pesach time. Okay, so even though it's not holy, it didn't become the object of a mitzvah like tefillin did, but still, the divine light penetrated it to a certain degree. And the same goes for everything that you do to prepare for a mitzvah. Let's say you planted a palm tree to get a lulav, or you planted an ester tree. Your whole purpose was for the mitzvah. So now the whole tree, even though the whole tree isn't holy, but every time you look at that ester tree in your backyard, it won't survive here, so don't try it. But imagine you lived in a place where you planted an ester, you could plant aravos, right? The willows. Plant a willow bush. And every time you look at it, you're thinking about sukkahs. Look how much money I'm going to save on sukkahs, because aravos are very expensive, okay? And they shrivel up very quickly. So every time you look at the willow bush, you're thinking mitzvah. So now, if the whole purpose of a mitzvah is to elevate and to reveal the essence of the lowest of the low, why do you have to make tefillin from kosher animal skin? Why shouldn't we make tefillin from a pig? Isn't the pig lower than a cow? Why do we only eat cows? Shouldn't we eat a pig if it's seen as lower? If we're trying to elevate the lowest, shouldn't we get to the lowest?
But God designated certain animals to be kosher. I know the Noah, which we're going to read this week, he brought, I believe, seven
Mhm.
pairs of kosher animals versus only one pair of
Right.
non-kosher animals. So that there was a intent purpose for using kosher animals.
So we're not gonna discuss all the reasons why. We really, in the beginning of time, the first few chapters, not 6, 7, 8, we discussed a little bit why God created things, klipa, right? We discussed klipa. So in anything in the world, you have the fruit, which is the edible part, and the same goes for anything. Anything, there's the fruit and there's the scrap, the klipa, whatever it is that's protects it. But within the klipa, there are two types. There is the klipa that's closer to the fruit. If you take an orange, the inside peel that's edible, even though it's not maybe as tasty as the fruit, but it's still edible. And then there's the outer peel, which is inedible. Now, why did God create outer peels? Why did God create a pig or a horse or a lion that's not kosher, I'm not suggesting go eat lions or horses. I'm saying if you're not Jewish, I don't know that you should eat those either. But why did God create meat that can't be eaten? It's a discussion for a different time, whether it's to give us free choice or other things. But the point is that the world is divided into three. Now, if you stuck someone into the world and you said, go find food, the person is only going to look for the fruit. He's going to throw away even the shell, even the peels that are edible. Why? Why should I eat edible shells if I could just find another fruit and eat more of the juicy stuff, of the good stuff? Why would I dignify myself with, in Jewish terms, why would I dignify myself with dealing with klipas noga, with permissible things, if I could just study Torah and do mitzvahs all day? Why should I go and work 6 days a week if I could just study Torah? Why should I have kids and have to waste my time, so to speak? And if I could just spend more time studying Torah, becoming closer to God. Yeah. So the point here isn't to go to the lowest place we're allowed to. God made a low place that the way we elevate it is by not going there. Okay, that's off the table. The point is we have to go to places that we otherwise wouldn't. Most other religions, and I don't know all, I don't even know most, but I imagine, based on the big ones we know today, most religions value the spiritual more than the physical, and therefore part of the religious status climbing is how disconnected you can become from the physical, and how much more, how spiritual you could become without the physical. Okay? This is what the Torah is trying to reverse. This is what the Torah is trying to exclude. We should not forget about this world, not because it needs us, but because this is the whole purpose for which we were created. If a person went and studied Torah all day, didn't focus on mitzvahs, now, you do need some people, the greatest rabbis, you need people that the way they affect the world is by studying Torah all day. Okay? That has happened. There are people like that. But it has to be, it's not so simple. It's not so simple, right? A person can't just decide they're going to take this path. The path God set up in the Torah, 6 days a week you shall work, and the seventh day you should rest. We have to work with the world. This is why we were put here. Dealing with the physical isn't not just an obstacle to the service of God. It is the service of God. This is how we make the world. We elevate the physical world, the lowest place. It just interesting. You take a. So I said, or forget about what I said. Do you know what type of skin, animal skin, can you use for tefillin or mezuzahs or Torah scrolls? What type of animal skin? Cat?
Yeah.
Calf. Just a calf?
Yeah.
Antelope?
Anything's kosher, right?
Oh, any animal that's kosher, you can use its skin. You would think, why? Because a non-kosher animal is out of bounds, right? It's part of this place that God doesn't want us to find. What happens now? Does the animal have to be slaughtered kosher in order to use its skin for tefillin or mezuzahs?
I don't think so.
You would think so, right? If the whole purpose of using the skin is skin that's permissible, that's not true.
Yeah.
By the way, there are people that try to get skin only from kosher slaughtered animals, because obviously that would make, but it's a lot more expensive. You're paying premium because there aren't as many kosher animals. That every cow McDonald's kills, we can use its skin for tefillin. If you're going to rely on only the cows that Jews slaughter and that end up being kosher, because a lot of cows that are slaughtered are found out not to be kosher. In other words, because of the treif, right? They're bruised inside, damaged inside. But if you relied only on kosher skin, you'd be in big trouble to find enough skin for everyone to use. So no, you don't need a kosher slaughtered animal to make tefillin or mezuzahs. So now the question is, wait a second. If you don't need it to be slaughtered kosher because you're not eating it, you just so why can't it be pig skin? And if it needs to be kosher, yeah, but if it was slaughtered, a cow that is slaughtered, by the way, I shouldn't. Something's telling me. Something's telling me that it's worse to eat a kosher animal that wasn't slaughtered properly than a non-kosher animal. I don't know why I'm thinking that. Anyhow, either way, if we're not eating it, why can't we use pigskin? And if it has to be kosher, why can a roadkill a deer skin? Deer skin could be used, right? Deer is kosher animal, so why can a roadkill be used for tefillin or mezuzahs? So, based on what we just said, what's the whole purpose of the mitzvah? To elevate the physical. Now, a cow can be elevated. Now, in order to elevate it to the level that we're allowed to eat it, it has to be slaughtered kosher. But the cow itself is elevatable. You know,
Kosher's not
a
elevated.
pig cannot be elevated. The only way to elevate is by not engaging in it. It can't be elevated. The cow can be elevated. So the Torah is very specific. In order to elevate it to become a part of you, to ingest it, that needs kosher. That needs a kosher slaughter. And needs a whole bunch of there's a whole bunch of conditions. But even if it's not slaughtered kosher, and therefore I can't eat it, the cow is the skin. I'm not eating the skin, so I can still elevate the skin because it's a permissible object. But again, here's the point: we have to find anything in this world that's permissible and elevate it. So when the satellite radio comes out or satellite television comes out, do you say this is unholy and ban it, or do you engage it? So in our homes, we don't have it, because if you sit and consume what's on there, there's probably a lot of unholy things. But the Rebbe, anytime he had a public gathering during the week, not on Shabbos, would broadcast the gathering on satellite television. But you won't find a chassid's home that has a television in the home. So is the television good or bad? Well, the television isn't good or bad. It depends what you're using it for. Usually, if you're consuming television, it's a waste of time. So why would you have it? But if someone has it, and you have an option to put across those waves something positive, why wouldn't you use it?
Why is a computer any different than a television?
A computer is technically not different than a television.
But yet, you go ahead.
So first of all, most people in their homes don't have internet, won't necessarily have a television. They won't necessarily have a computer with internet. I didn't grow up with a computer in my house, and even my siblings that did, they didn't have internet. They were able to do homework on it, documents and things, but there's no internet. On my computer and the phone, we have filters. I don't. It's not open access. Yeah. Why would I invite that type of why would I invite that type of whatever I need, I can have if I need it. If it's helpful in my divine service, good. Right? But I think most people in their homes, we have a unique thing where our home is I have internet for the Chabad house, it's in the home, but none of the devices the kids have internet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because there's so much out on Chabad.org that makes it really worthwhile
of course,
for education.
Of course. But for a kid that's going to yeshiva all day, they don't use Chabad.org.
Right.
Chabad.org, for him, it's a waste of time. Why should he be reading articles that people wrote when he could study the Talmud? Right? Again, there's nothing bad in it. On the contrary, it's holy things. Right? Right? But this is the tricky part. The tricky part is, how do you know when you're going too far? So you have someone, he wants to give charity, so he's going to dedicate 7 days a week to work. 24/7, he's going to dedicate his life so he can have enough money to give tons of charity. There's a line. He's going to ignore his family because he can make more money to make them more comfortable or to support more yeshivas or more shuls. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? This takes clarity of mind. It usually takes consulting with someone that's objective and that's not in your subjective mind to make sure you don't You don't go too far or too short, but this is a challenge of living in the world, engaging it, but engaging it to the extent that we're elevating it and not getting sucked into it. Okay, let's see. Now, that was going to give us some examples here. Okay, let's start again. I don't know if we started. We did start, but let's start again from the top of 497. By performing the mitzvah, man draws the revelation of the blessed Ein Sof light from above downward, to be clothed in the physicality of this world. In other words, in an object which had heretofore been under the dominion of Klipas Noga, and had received this vitality from this Klipa, which is what? Namely, all pure, permissible objects with which the act of the mitzvah is performed. By performing the mitzvah, man draws the Ein Sof light upon the object with which it is performed. And this includes almost everything in the world, right? Because what percentage of the world is non-kosher animals, birds, or fish? In mass, it's a tiny percentage of the world. Most of the world, any vegetation is kosher, right? Almost everything in the world is kosher. For example, the parchment of the tefillin, mezuzah, and sefer Torah, which must be made from the skins of permissible kosher animals. As our sages state, for the work of heaven, in other words, mitzvah objects, only that which is pure and permissible to eat may be used. Similarly, an etrog, which is not orla. What's orla? So the
first 3 years.
very good. So the forbidden fruit of the tree's first 3 harvests, or money given to charity that has not been acquired through theft and the like. In other words, let me just finish this. In other words, other physical objects used in performing a mitzvah, all of which were previously in the realm of Klipat Noga, and as Alter Rebbe will conclude presently, are now merged into the divine will by serving the purpose of a mitzvah. Let's just
Go ahead and finish your.
let's just read the footnote here. For Arla is of the 3 completely unclean klipot that can never ascend into holiness, as is written in Eitz Chaim. Thus, fruit which is Arla, deriving its vitality from these klipot, cannot be elevated by having a mitzvah performed with it. And similarly, any mitzvah's performance involved a transgression, God forbid, like using stolen money for charity. Since the sinful act receives its vitality from the 3 completely unclean klipot, the resulting mitzvah cannot elevate it. Okay, so now this money is forbidden. Giving it to tzedakah will not elevate it. Yes, what was your question?
Okay. But then I guess I don't understand, why would God make non-kosher animals?
Very good. So that's something I said we're not going to get into today because it'll derail.
Right.
The most simple thing is so that there should be a free choice. You should have to choose. You should have to go to the store and avoid the shrimp and the pork, and even though it looks tempting, etc., and only take the kosher meat. That's a most basic, simple thing. There are many layers of explanations, mystical, etc. But most basic level, I think that's a good enough excuse for God to for this conversation. Good enough reason for God to forbid things.
The farmer. Okay. Okay, I understand there's certain people that kill kosher animals to make sure they're kosher and able to eat them.
Yeah.
But the average farmer out in the middle of nowhere knows how to do that then.
No,
In the past, I mean, way back.
not necessarily, but every city.
And a rabbi to,
No, almost every city had a sheikhet, a kosher slaughterer. He may have been the butcher also.
oh, okay.
But in those days, you didn't, how often, you couldn't store, it wasn't like an operation. You slaughtered an animal on Friday because you had enough customers to buy the animal, or when there was a wedding, or, you didn't slaughter animals every day. You couldn't put it in the freezer. There's no freezers, right? No refrigerators.
They used to dry stuff and make it so that you could eat it later.
Yeah, I think for most of Jewish history, you never know where you're going to be tomorrow. People slaughtered animals when there was enough demand to eat it. saying it was something one person in town was able to take care of. If it was a very big city, I'm sure they had more than one butcher. They had Romanian and I don't know what else existed here before Jewel and I'm saying I'm sure there were more. I'm sure there were more butchers besides
Oh,
Romania.
yeah, there was one in each neighborhood. In fact, that was my first
Right.
job. I delivered on my bicycle to.
There were butchers was because you couldn't buy every
There
other
wasn't
product.
packaged meat, there was only butchers.
Yeah, but I'm saying you had to be Jewish. You couldn't buy every other product you can buy from a non-kosher establishment. In the olden days, even baked goods, most breads most people didn't necessarily buy from a kosher baker because what was bread? Flour and water. Bread was kosher wherever you bought it from.
Oh,
Today they use the ovens for the breads for many other things, for dairy things and other things that aren't kosher. Today bread has to be kosher. But in I was in France for a summer, and we were in the mountains in France near the border of Spain, and it was like 2 hours. It wasn't right there, but it was in that region. And we used to get baguettes at the beginning of the summer. We went. They turned off the ovens. We turned it back on, so it's Pat Yisrael. It's considered baked by a Jew. They ran 24/7. We would get to deliver fresh baguettes every day. There was no mashgiach. The plant was baguettes. It was kosher ingredients. There was no reason not to eat from there. Yeah. But in America and most of the civilized world today, it's problematic to eat things. Although usually I think most bread could be, so a lot of bread today already has kosher certification on it.
I have one other.
Okay, yeah.
Back to the mitzvah.
Yeah.
You gave us 3 things and you said there were 4.
Because I divided, I spoke.
And the work to get the food, those are 2.
No. There's the object you do the mitzvah with.
Right.
There's the body, but I divided the body into the physical part and the speech part, which we'll talk about soon. We're not going to get.
Okay,
We didn't get to yet. So far, we just discussed the object to which you did the mitzvah.
okay.
We're just talking about that so far. So I'll just to close off this section before we get to the body, to the person, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Tanya, his successor was the Mittel Rebbe, called the Middle Rebbe. Don't ask me why. And his son did not succeed him. His son-in-law did. His son-in-law, who was also a grandson of the Alter Rebbe, through his mother. So in other words, the Alter Rebbe had a son. He had multiple kids, but the Alter Rebbe had a son and a daughter. The daughter had a son. This Menachem Mendel married his first cousin, his first cousin, and so he was the first Rebbe's grandson and the second Rebbe's son-in-law. Okay? His mother died when he was a very young boy. He was 2 years old. A long story, and so a chassid was once telling the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, a story about his grandfather. What was the story? The story was that someone had once brought Alter Rebbe a gift, a snuff box, tobacco, snuff box, and it was made out of silver. And the Alter Rebbe said, "There's one limb in the body that isn't already seduced by temptation, and other than nose, you want to seduce. It's more connected to the soul, and you want to." Make it vain. You want to give it. So he said Alter Rebbe broke off the top of the snuff box and used it as a mirror for his tefillin. Most people that put on tefillin every day, in their tefillin bag, they'll have a little mirror because the tefillin has to be in the center. Even the tefillin that you have, there should be a mirror in it, right?
No.
Most tefillin today in the bottom of when you open the tefillin in the bottom, there's like a mirror. Check.
Wait a minute, what you mean?
In the case, you take the case. No, not the case. The case, like the place where you wrap the tefillin into. Open it and look inside if there's a mirror there.
I
Okay.
never looked.
The reason there's a mirror is because the tefillin, it says, it's supposed to be between your eyes, but we don't put it here between your eyes. We put it on the top of your hairline, right? But it has to be directly between your eyes. It has to be in the middle of your head. Most people can't tell. You try, figure out where the middle of your head is, and then look at the mirror. You'll probably didn't get it straight. So I have in my tefillin bag, I have a mirror. I don't have the mirror, I take out my phone and, use the selfie camera, but you use something to identify that. If you go to a shul, a lot of times you'll see when people put on tefillin, they'll turn to the person sitting next to them, make sure my tefillin is straight.
Really?
Because even in a mirror, if it's too small or you're too close, sometimes you don't get an actual, when someone's standing across you, you could see it actually. So he said the Alter Rebbe broke off the cover of the snuff box, and it was silver, so it was shiny, reflective, and he used it as a mirror for his tefillin. This was the story that this chassid told the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek heard the story, and Tzemach Tzedek said, it's not possible the story happened the way you said it. It could be there's one detail that you missed or that you mixed up, and then the story would make sense. What was the problem with the story? He said, my grandfather would never break something. It could be what he did was he took off the hinge that connected the top and the bottom, and he used the top, but he wouldn't break it. That's the story. Why is this story brought down? It's brought down in the books to explain this idea. When we see a physical object, the first thing that enters our mind is, can this physical object be utilized for a mitzvah, or to help me with a mitzvah, or to prepare me for a mitzvah? In other words, what am I looking? I'm looking, how can I elevate more of the permissible physical world to godliness? The more books I print, more Torah books I print, the more paper will be used for holy things. We can't rely on computers because there's at least one day a week you can't use computers to study. So we need to print books. We can't go totally paper free. The same thing with any other thing we see. Okay, this takes care of the physical material in the world. So what's the world for? The world is for me to find opportunities and therefore, when you walk down the street, instead of listening to music, listen to a Torah class. Instead of thinking about nothing, think about something positive. It says when Mashiach will come, the stones on which we will walk will tell us, will speak. Doesn't mean they'll have a mouth and speak, but it'll be obvious. They'll tell us what gives you the right to step on me. If you're saying words of Torah, in other words, you're visibly a human being, then you have the right to walk on me. But if not, then you're just a stone like me. What gives you the right to step over me? Yeah. Today, the stone is saying the same thing. We just don't see it because the godliness is concealed. When the godliness is revealed, if you think about it, we use words here that are very revealed, concealed. These are things that every person has a red line you wouldn't cross when it comes to a mitzvah or something moral or ethical. But let's use a mitzvah for our conversation. Let's say it's, I don't know, eating on Yom Kippur. Obviously, some people are obligated to eat for medical reasons. They have to eat, but that's all you're able to eat for medical reasons. Yeah. Let's say you see someone just blatantly eating on Yom Kippur. What do you think? I'm not asking what you should do, what you should say to him, if you should beat him on the head, or what are you thinking inside? When you see someone that knows better and they're eating on Yom Kippur for no good reason.
You feel bad for him
Why do you feel bad for him?
because he's not, I guess, doing what he's supposed to do, and he's the only one that can correct himself.
Do you have that same feeling bad when you see someone else driving over the speed limit? No.
Unless they cut me off doing it.
Yeah, but then you get mad at them. You don't have pity on them. You don't feel bad for them. You feel angry at them.
Yeah.
1 minute. Why? You should feel pity. You should feel bad for them cutting you off. Why? The guy's being a jerk. You should feel bad for him. We don't feel bad for him.
No, you feel mad at him.
You feel mad at him. So, but when you see someone eating on Yom Kippur, you don't see someone eating on Yom Kippur. Well, you see, obviously not with your physical eyes, but you see it with your physical eyes. You see that Yom Kippur, we're not allowed to eat. You're a Jew. How are you eating on Yom Kippur? Everything I just said you saw, you didn't actually see it with your physical eyes, but it was in your eye, it was in your face, it was revealed. It's revealed. That's what we mean revealed and concealed. Yeah. When you look at a Jew fasting on Yom Kippur, even though it's difficult for him, you don't see a person. You're amazed. You see Jew, you see God, you see something else other than just a person struggling because he's fasting. This is what we mean revealed and concealed. When we look at the world, when we see a Jew eating a cheeseburger, it doesn't bother us, or maybe not all, it doesn't necessarily bother us as much as if they're eating on Yom Kippur. It's the same God that gave us the same mitzvah. What's the difference? On the contrary, eating a cheeseburger might have a bigger punishment than eating on Yom Kippur. Believe it or not. And yet, for some reason, eating on Yom Kippur is something that even Jews who eat cheeseburgers won't eat on Yom Kippur.
Well,
But why not? Because it's not revealed. Why is it not revealed? Either it could have to do with education, it could have to do with how much he knows, but it shows us that in the world today, the way we live, when you look at physical things, you see physical, unless you have a reason to see spiritual. However, there are certain things that are so ingrained in you that you don't see physical. All you see is spiritual. When you see a Jew eating on Yom Kippur, you don't see him eating on Yom Kippur. You feel bad for him.
well, you know, it's amazing. Okay, I don't keep kosher. But yet I won't eat bread on Passover.
There's a comical story. It's not a comical story because to make fun of. On the contrary, I think it expresses the Jewish neshama. We'll pause here. It expresses the Jewish neshama in a tremendous way. But there was once they say the story about a Chabad rabbi, and one of his congregants called him on Pesach. He was at the golf course, and he was so excited. He had a cheeseburger. They served him a cheeseburger, and he threw out the bread because it was Pesach.
But he ate the cheese of the meat.
Now, by the way, it's a good thing. Why should you do two? Have two transgressions. You could just do one. So there's no question. Better throw out the bread if you're willing to throw out the bread. The guy probably, first of all, he probably didn't know better. But even if he would have known better one than two, right? But what does it go to show? It goes to show that when we look, everything we see in the world is divided into the physical and the spiritual. Usually, by default, the physical is real and the spiritual has to be imagined. There are a few things in the world that the spiritual is more real than the physical to us. When we think about the love we have for our kids or for our family, the love is more real to us than the physical. When your kid does something that annoys you, the love is more real than the kid that annoyed you, than the physical kid that annoyed you. So in other words, we are capable of rising above the physical when it comes to important things in our life. That's the goal here. The goal here is that everything physical should be revealed for what it truly is. We should stop seeing physical. We should only see the spiritual. Again, not that we should ignore the physical because you still have to do a mitzvah. But when you see the mitzvah, when you see the tefillin, you shouldn't see tefillin. You shouldn't see, oh, this is a half hour of my time. You should see mitzvah. That's the goal. And when Mashiach comes, it'll be perfect. In other words, when Mashiach comes, it won't be a struggle. That's what we'll see. That's how we'll see the world. Today, it's a struggle. And every time we do the mitzvah, it's another marble in the jar. But it's different. Another part of the world became a marble. And then soon the whole world will fill with marbles. And then Mashiach will be here. It'll be revealed.
Is there a difference? Like,